I have a story for you that really will make your skin crawl. It's a story about what happened to me a couple of years ago when a problematic employee started acting up. I was working at McDonald's at the time. I was a manager for some years now, and I knew how to do my job extremely well. This wasn't a career that I dreamed of since I was a kid, but following certain circumstances that went on in my life throughout the years, I ended up here. I started as a cashier and worked my way up. I knew that the customer was always right, and I strongly believed that more important than the food was the attitude towards the people who come and eat here. And as a manager, I expected nothing less from my employees. I would always talk to them, and I would even train them. My goal was to prepare every single employee for those bad customers that would be rude to them. One day, I received a resume. It was from a woman who was pretty old to work at McDonald's. She was 59, but I found that her resume was interesting. She was a former manager herself, but due to different problems at the workplace and the economy, she ended up jobless. I decided to give her a chance and called her in for a second interview. Everything went well. She was nice, smart, and as I could tell, she was really eager to learn something new. I just had a feeling that she would be a hard worker and would not slack off like many of the other employees do. I gave her a chance, and the next day she came in for work, early I might add. I was already there because I would always arrive ahead of time, but I was surprised when I saw her 2 hours early. Because we had some time to spare, I trained her and managed to give some insights about what was going on there. She seemed to be picking it up really well. I also insisted on the fact that she may encounter some rude customers, and I explained what she needed to do if that happens. The woman named Mary was a delight. She was doing everything right, but something happened after about 2 months. We started to get complaints about a certain employee. We didn't receive any before, and as I began reading the written complaints from the suggestion box, I could see that absolutely all of them were about Mary. I couldn't believe it. She was so nice and helpful. I wondered what could have happened. But as I continued to read on, I could see that all of the complaints were the same. The woman was being rude to any customer who didn't eat their entire meal. One person also wrote that they left a couple of fries on the tray, and when Mary saw them, she lost it. Mary started to yell at the person, demanded that he would eat what was left. She then started saying that the person was skinny and looked sick. The majority of the complaints were along these lines. The person left food on the tray, and as he wanted to leave, Mary would come right over and yell at the person, calling him names, sometimes even picking the food up and trying to shove it into their mouths. It was something that I never had to deal with before. I tried to talk to her, but when I did, she explained that it's a shame for people to waste food. She wondered why would they buy it if they didn't want to finish all of it. I talked to her and explained that it is none of her business what the person does, as long as they pay for their food. At that moment, Mary got angry and started yelling at me, telling me that I don't understand and that I'm as small-minded as all the people who come to McDonald's and only eat half of what they ordered. I tried not to get angry, but her behavior was unacceptable. I told her that I would give her one last chance to change her behavior or she would be out of there. Mary said, "Fine," and got up before heading towards the door of my office, slamming it behind her. But to my surprise, the next day, she was even worse, as I saw her being rude to the customers with my own eyes. One girl ordered a Big Mac, and she only took one bite of it. She then stood up to leave, but Mary shouted at her from across the room. It was so embarrassing. So at that moment, I took her into my office and had no choice but to fire her. She then smiled at me, and instead of being angry, she said the same, "Fine," but in a calmer tone of voice. For the next few days, everything went well at the workplace. There were no complaints, and people relaxed, knowing that the crazy woman was no longer working there. It was hard to do, but I had to get rid of her. Sometimes, as a manager, you have to make tough decisions. One night, as I was preparing to go to bed and my wife was on a work trip, I decided to go into the kitchen and have a glass of milk. I opened the fridge, grabbed my milk, and as I turned around, I thought I heard the sound of a door creaking. I said, "Hello?" thinking that my wife came home a couple of hours earlier, but with no response. I checked everything, and I got used to the idea that I must have misheard the noise. Anyway, I went back to bed and fell asleep in no time, thanks to the milk. I don't know for how long I was asleep, but I woke up at around 2 a.m. all of a sudden, and I couldn't move my hands and my legs. I thought it was sleep paralysis, but when I had a look, I saw that I was tied up. I screamed, but no one answered. After a couple of minutes of me trying to escape, Mary came in my bedroom. I was freaked out and asked her what is going on, but instead of answering me, she came closer, and I could see that she had some food in her hands. In her right hand, she had a McDouble, and in her left hand, she had fries. She starts shoving the food in my mouth, force-feeding me. The food didn't stop. Even when I was choking, she stuffed fries down my throat. Not long, and I started to tear up. It was a horrible experience, and I thought I was going to suffocate at any moment. Mary kept smiling, and without saying a word, she continued to feed me. I even threw up a couple of times, but she said that it was all right. She has more food. The woman had a giant bag from McDonald's next to my bed, enough to feed 20 people. I begged her to stop each time I had my mouth without food in it, but she continued. I peed myself as I was crying and throwing up at the same time. I thought I was going to die and that one piece of food will get stuck in my throat. I was there in a puddle of my own urine and vomit, totally helpless. At around 5 a.m., I could hear a noise coming from downstairs, and Mary heard it too as she stopped putting burgers in my mouth. It was my wife who came home from her business trip. I started screaming, and at that moment, Mary started putting more food in my mouth. As my wife rushed upstairs, Mary got scared and ran towards the door. The two met outside my bedroom, and Mary pushed my wife out of the way, then ran towards the front door before escaping. Fortunately, I was okay after my wife untied me. We called the cops and gave them all of Mary's details, but to this day, the police hasn't been able to find her.
It all started at the beginning of June. I just finished high school, but as it turned out, I was not that academically gifted. When it came to schoolwork, I would much rather hang out with my friends than focus on the homework. And the result of this was I wouldn't have a chance to go to college. But I didn't want to go anyway. I just wanted to work and make my own money. During that time, I found several places around town that would hire someone who had just finished high school. But I wasn't keen on working at a fast food restaurant or inflating tires at the local tire shop. It wasn't that I didn't like to work, but the pay was lousy. In my mind, I needed to make some serious cash. I asked around for job opportunities that paid well over a minimum wage. Unfortunately, no one had a lead. So, I just had to take the first job I found, which was one at McDonald's. I'm not saying that working there was bad or anything, but I just had a different vision in my mind. Anyway, I went in, talked to the manager, and before I knew it, I got a uniform and was expected to work the next morning. Oh, God, I hate myself, I said while looking in the mirror early in the morning. I was all dressed up in that stupid uniform, wearing that stupid hat. But that's what I had to do. I had no choice. In about half an hour, there I was. I walked inside and went into the back to meet with the manager. "Good morning," she said while sipping on her black coffee, giving me a smile that made me contemplate my life. "Morning," I responded with a tired look on my face. The next thing I knew, she grabbed my hand. I didn't know what was going on, but she started showing me around the place. Then she explained my duties. I was in the back. I had to make the fries. "Glamorous," I said while inhaling the delicious smell of fried goodness. I had a coffee before we opened, and bam, I was working. The first customer came in, and shortly thereafter, a whole bunch of them arrived. "What's up with that guy?" I asked one of my colleagues while I was taking out the fries. "Oh, him? He walks in here every day and begs for food, but we all know he just throws it away. He wants money to get drunk," Maria told me. As I was working, the guy came into the McDonald's. He was wearing old, torn clothes, he had long, greasy hair, and a very bushy beard. "Give me some fries," I heard. I didn't want to look at him. "Give me some fries, kid," he yelled. I turned my head to the right, and he was staring right at me. I got back to what I was doing, and fortunately security came and escorted him outside. He then walked away and didn't come back for the rest of the day. Everyone seemed to know him, and they weren't bothered by him that much. But in that second, when I turned my head and looked into his eyes, I saw something strange. It was like he had something personal towards me. He had the same look my bullies used to have back in middle school. Anyway, as the day went on, nothing interesting happened. I just had my head so deep in those fries that I almost forgot to go home on closing time. "See you tomorrow, rookie," my manager told me while I walked out the door with the same smile she had that morning. "Yeah, see you," I responded. But all I wanted to do was to get out of there. I was so tired, and my feet hurt from standing all day. As soon as I got home, I took a shower and went straight to bed. The next morning, as I arrived at work, the same smile greeted me. "I guess I'll have to get used to this," I said to myself while I smiled back at the manager. A couple of hours later, the same guy came in. Again, he demanded fries and he kept his eyes on me. "Come on, sir, you have to leave the store," my manager said. But he did something that no one thought would be possible. Pushed the manager, making her fall on the floor right there in front of everyone. Security quickly came and dragged the man outside. While he was being forced towards the exit, he continued to say, "I'll get you, kid! I want my fries! You're gonna pay!" with an evil look on his face. It gave me the creeps, and I told this to my colleague. She said she'd never seen him do something like this. He wasn't violent. All that he would normally do was come inside and ask for food, then leave without the security being involved. "I guess he has something personal towards you," she told me while laughing and patting me on the back. But I didn't laugh. I was freaked out. The rest of my shift ended without any interruptions. But as soon as I got outside, in the parking lot, I felt eyes on me. I looked left and right, but there wasn't anyone there. It was weirdly quiet. I hopped on the bus and went home. For the entirety of the bus ride, I smelled something awful. I didn't know where it came from, but someone in that bus didn't shower for quite a while. Before I knew it, I was at my front door. While I was searching for my keys, I felt a hand grabbing me from behind. I got pulled back and fell on my stairs, hitting my head on the pavement. "Now I got you!" I heard while still trying to get myself back together after the fall. I opened my eyes, and there he was. The homeless guy who had his foot on my chest, making it difficult for me to breathe. "Get off!" I yelled, but he continued to stare into my eyes with that evil look. I managed to get his foot away and tried to escape, but he caught up and tackled me. He started raining punches, and I was trying so hard to protect myself, but I wasn't a fighter. My vision started to get blurry, and a loud ringing started to impair my hearing. I guess I was getting beaten up pretty badly. "Hey!" I heard. It was a neighbor of mine. He saw the entire scene and came to help. "Get off of him!" he yelled. The homeless guy got up and took out a knife. Then, without saying anything, he attacked my neighbor. Everything happened so fast. By the time I got up, the two men were laying on the grass. "Are you okay?" I asked my neighbor while going to check on him. He said he was fine, but a blood stain confirmed otherwise. I called an ambulance, and they quickly took him to the hospital, where he made a quick recovery. By the time the ambulance and police got there, the homeless guy was gone. He, too, left some bloodstains on the grass, but there wasn't any sign of him. He didn't come to the McDonald's after that incident. I haven't seen him ever since. I just hope that even if he's still alive, he stays away from me.
I glanced at the woman sitting by the table towards the back in McDonald's. She always came around this time, and then she would sit by herself for about 30 minutes before a man would come to join her. They would then speak in low tones. I guessed that they were lovers, but maybe they had been in a disagreement because every time the man left her, she would look visibly frightened. It just looked like a lover's spat, so no one really paid them any attention. She would then glance around the restaurant, trying to see if anyone was looking at her. I always pretended I never noticed. She ordered the same thing, 1 iced mocha and a hamburger. It was a Friday night. She had been here for a while now. It had been 2 hours, and her lover was nowhere to be found. She was continually glancing at her wristwatch. He never used to take this long. I wondered why he was so late. It was a few minutes to closing time, and all the other customers were ready to leave. In fact, just 2 tables were occupied. A couple sat at one, whispering affectionately to each other, and this lady occupied the second one. I didn't know her name. I always referred to her as the sad lady because she always looked so sad. I had never seen her smile. She was beautiful, with pale blonde hair tumbling down her shoulders to her mid-back and blue eyes that always looked troubled. The other couple left, the man opening the door for the lady as they both laughed together. Steve, my boss, came in from his office and glanced around the restaurant. "Only her?" I nodded and told him that I had to clean the counter before I left and that if the lady was still there, I would ask her to leave. Steve told me to hurry because all the other employees had gone home and it was late. I told him I would be fine. After I was done cleaning and saw that the sad lady was still there, I sighed and made my way over to her. "Hello, I'm about to close the building. You have to leave." She looked at me with her big blue eyes and nodded. She stood up, grabbing her purse from the table. She stumbled as she pushed her chair back and my hands shot out to steady her. We both heard the door open and looked back. It was the man I assumed to be her lover. Her body began to tremble, and that was when I realized my hands were still on her waist. I abruptly dropped my hands and backed away. The man looked at her first, then slowly returned his gaze to me. He approached quietly with rage in his bloodshot eyes. He had sandy brown hair and looked to be above 6 feet. I wanted to be as far away from them as possible because the guy stared as if he was capable of murder. He glared at the sad lady. "Grace, so I don't show up one night and eventually you leave me for another man?" he said. The lady stammered and tried to explain that it was a misunderstanding, but the man would not listen. Instead, it seemed like his rage was worsening. I steadily moved towards the counter where my phone was because the situation looked like it was going to get violent. He suddenly grabbed her hand and she yelled in pain, saying, "Charles, you are hurting me." "So?" he told her. "Do you know how it felt like to see another man's hands on you? You're mine." I was the other man. I swallowed hard because it seemed like I was in big trouble. I lunged for my phone and opened the dialer. He suddenly shouted at me and asked what I was doing with my phone. He told me if I was thinking of calling the police, that I should stop. If not, he would hurt me. He was really big. He had big muscles and a towering figure. He was very intimidating. I looked at Grace and saw that he still held her arm in a vice-like grip. She was whimpering in pain, but didn't put up a fight. I told him I wouldn't call the police if he let her go and just walked away quietly. He scoffed at me and told me I had no idea what I was talking about. He kept on saying, "Grace is mine. No one touches her but me." I was beginning to think that the man was a psychopath. I began to dial on my phone 911. As soon as I was about to hit the call button, my phone got wrenched away from my hands. I watched in horror as he threw it across the room and it shattered on the opposite wall. Apparently, in the 2 seconds I glanced down to type on my phone, he had released Grace and crossed over to me. He punched me on the side of my face and my head snapped to the other side. My vision swam and I clutched my head in pain. "I told you to not call the police. Do you think you are smart?" he shouted. A chair scraped on the floor and we both looked back to see Grace moving towards the exit. He roared and ran towards her. She wasn't fast enough. He pulled her back by her hair and slapped her face hard. Her lip split and got bloody. My hands were still on my swollen face from the punch he gave me. It began to dawn on me slowly that Charles was an animal that would hurt us if we tried to escape. My survival instincts took over. I grabbed a frying pan under the cabinet and crept towards him. His back was to me, and he kept shaking Grace by her hair. Grace saw me approaching with the frying pan and bit his arm to distract him. He yelled and raised a meaty palm, probably to slap her again. I swung the pan with all my strength and was satisfied to hear a cracking sound. He dropped to the floor, groaning. I reached around him and grabbed Grace's hand, ignoring the pain from my face. "Come on, there's a back door," I said. "No, Grace, don't leave me." He started to sob. I looked back at him in disgust and led Grace outside through the back door. As soon as we got outside, Grace gulped down air and pushed her hair back from her face. Her face was wet with tears. I said nothing, and I led her to a safe distance from the restaurant. I was wondering how we would call the police when I saw that Grace was clutching her purse. "Please tell me you have a phone there," I pleaded. She gave me her phone, and I called 911 and informed them of our situation. I gave them our location, and they promised to be there in about 10 minutes. After the call, Grace looked at me with her blue eyes shining with tears. "Thank you so much," she choked out. "I never thought I would be free." I asked her how she got herself involved with him. She told me that he had been stalking her for a long time. He later approached her and asked her out. Grace said she turned him down because he looked like a weirdo and she did not even know him. After the encounter, he had called to tell her that he knew where her mother lived and he wouldn't hesitate to hurt her if she did not do as he asked. He told her that if she got the police involved, he would know and her mother would die before he got captured. I had no choice. I couldn't let him kill my mom. She's the only family I have left. She said he forced her to go out with him, and it was always at McDonald's. She said he had lucid dreams where it felt like he was a normal person, but just like flipping a switch, he would revert back to being a threatening beast. The police arrived and came to us. They drove us back to McDonald's to arrest Charles. I narrated the whole ordeal on the way. We opened the door and saw that he was nowhere to be found. He had escaped. I should have locked the doors. I was too focused on getting us to safety. There was some blood on the floor with some kind of writing. Grace paled as she read it. "Your mother dies today, and I'll come for you." Grace collapsed to the floor and began to weep uncontrollably. The police assured her that they would catch him no matter what. They went round the restaurant trying to get his prints. When they were done, they took us both to the hospital and we got treated. The next day, the news of a dead woman was everywhere. She had been killed in a violent manner, as if the killer had been too enraged to kill her cleanly. Her bones were broken, and across her stomach were the words, "I'm coming for you." I never saw Grace in McDonald's anymore, but I knew of a certainty that as long as Charles was still out there, Grace would always be looking over her shoulder. She would never know peace.
Cover my shift, please? I looked at Mike and sighed. Sure, I don't have anything to do tonight anyway. I was supposed to get off work in about 30 minutes, but it meant that I'd have to stay for the night shift now. It was hard to resist Mike's baby blue eyes. I worked at McDonald's and was grateful for my job. It came at the time when I was struggling to pay my bills. My parents couldn't cater to my every need, so I had to figure out a way myself. I was in college, but we were on a break at the moment, so it meant I didn't have to rush back to school immediately after my job. I could be out in more hours. Mike waved at me as he hurried out, probably off to some date with his girlfriend. They'd been together for about 3 months and were the cutest thing ever. I took orders as quickly as I could and gave them out just as fast. I wanted to go home and sleep. At 20, there wasn't a lot I was doing besides school. I heard that the world outside school could be brutal, so I tried to take care of myself whenever I could. Whoever was on the last shift was in charge of locking up the restaurant, and I guessed that it was my job to do now. I looked at the time and saw that it was 8:30. I sighed and continued answering the trickle of customers that came in. Finally, the last group of customers left, and I started to wipe the tables before I left. It was around 9. I just finished cleaning the last one when the front door opened. I turned around to tell the person that we had closed when I suddenly stopped. It was a big man and his face looked scary. He had 3 piercings above his right eyebrow and a bushy beard. His eyes looked so small compared to the rest of his face. I swallowed and walked to him, taking small steps. "I'm sorry, but we're already closed." He looked at me, then surveyed the rest of the restaurant. After nodding to himself, he went to sit down at the table I just cleaned. "I only want to stay here for a while. When you're about to leave, I'll go," he said. He looked like he was anxious. I retreated quietly and nodded to him. I couldn't exactly tell him no. I went back to the cleaning and saw that he was looking nervous, glancing at the door every now and then. I wondered if he was avoiding something, or maybe just needed a place to stay for a while. I wasn't sure it was safe being alone with someone I knew nothing about, especially when it turns out that he's not a customer. I finished finally and was about to go to him to tell him I was about to lock up, when I heard a noise at the front door. His eyes went to mine, and I watched as he drew a gun from the waistband of his pants. I screamed and ran to the counter. The front door got kicked open and 2 men stormed in. "Where is he?" one of them yelled before he sighted the man and charged for him. The man fired a shot into the ceiling, and the other men dove to the floor. I heard them groan as they hit the floor. It didn't sound like anyone had gotten shot. I cowered behind the counter and cursed silently. My phone was in the locker at the employees' room, so there was no way to call the police. I covered my ears with my hands and tried to make myself as unnoticeable as possible. I knew they couldn't see me behind the counter, and I hoped they forgot that I was there. A chair scraped at the floor, and I carefully peeked out. The first man was on the floor with the 2 men standing over him. His gun was somewhere else on the floor, and he pleaded with them. "Wait, just give me more time. I'll get the money, I promise," the man yelled, his eyes widening in panic. "Shut up." The other man shot him in the chest and looked up at the sound of my gasp. "Oh shit," I whispered. I ran through the back door, my Converse skidding on the floor. They were right behind me, and I knew that they wanted to eliminate me so that I wouldn't let it out that they just killed someone. My heart was beating erratically and fear courses through my veins. Never in my life did I think I would be in such a situation. The street was dark, but I could make out a few people just up ahead. If I could reach them in time, they should be able to offer help. "Please help me," I yelled when I got within earshot. The men behind me stopped when they noticed the people up ahead, and I looked back to see them running in the other direction. I pointed towards them. "Those men just killed someone," I gasped out, trying to catch my breath. "And they were about to kill me too." My body started to tremble when I realized the enormity of the situation. If they had caught up with me, I would have been dead. The people I had run up to quickly called the cops, choosing to wait with me as I narrated what happened. We walked back to McDonald's together and saw that the man was still there, blood pooling under him. His eyes were closed, but he appeared to still be breathing. I was still in shock. What had started out as a pleasant night took a sinister turn. The cops arrived and took control of the situation. An ambulance was called for the man on the floor, and he was rushed to the hospital. They claimed he was in a critical condition. The cops interrogated me and made me describe the men to great detail. It wasn't hard for me to do because I still remembered their faces vividly. The one that had shot the man was of average height and was bald. The other one was a bit taller and had a lanky frame. The cops promised to get in touch with me if they needed my help. Frankly, all I wanted to do was to go home and sleep. The night has been exhausting for me. I got dropped off at my apartment, a dingy thing in the middle of my area. I went straight to my room and lied down on my bed. I tried to sleep, but my attempts were unsuccessful. I kept replaying the moment when the man got shot. It was one thing to watch it happen on TV, It was another thing to see it happen right in front of me. My body still had slight tremors. I had never felt as scared as I did when I was being chased by those men, and it felt like they were going to catch up to me. I finally fell asleep and decided that I would never take the night shift ever again. Get the job done as soon as possible. I sighed as the call ended. Just when I decided to take a few days off for myself, another job had to delay me. I was a bounty hunter and was pretty good at my job. We didn't ask questions. Once a bounty is placed on a person, my job was to find the person. Easy. I worked with an underground chain of spies and agents. Things we did were always kept secret. No one above ground knew about the bounty hunts. I fired up my laptop and checked the details. The man's name was Chris, and he was in his 30s. He lived in one of those big estates in LA. I memorized his house number and took note of the number of guards that he had. His personal guards were 4, and none of them followed him to his house. Besides one other guard at the gate, there was no other person staying with him at night. I planned to go in the evening. The faster I got the job done, the faster I could be on my break, and try to enjoy myself for a while. I was 25 and lived a comfortable life. I got paid handsomely every time I captured someone with a bounty. Most of these people were criminals that had been eluding the police or FBI, so they placed bounties on them in hopes that one of us would capture them. I finalized my plans and took my bike to my target's house. I was dressed in black from head to toe. I stalked up to the house quietly. I crawled up the fence and landed on the balls of my feet. I saw the security guard dozing off on a chair in front of the gate. He had made it easy for me. I walked to him silently and shot a dart into his arm. His body went limp in a matter of seconds. The place looked like a graveyard. It was very dark and quiet. I approached the front door as silently as possible. My plan was to knock him out, then call my boss to pick him up. I didn't want it to get messy. I had a stun gun and I would use it on him if the need arises. My eyes roamed over the surroundings, and I thought it was strange that he managed to avoid getting captured by the police. I wondered how, especially if he lived in such a big place. I felt a presence behind me and reacted fast. I drew up my stun gun and swiveled around quickly. I shot it at the man who managed to almost creep up on me, but he dodged it. He barreled into me and knocked the gun from my hand. We fell to the floor, rolling on top of each other. I brought up my elbow and jammed him in the nose. He flinched but didn't retreat as he successfully pinned me down. He was heaving as I struggled underneath him. This was really bad. I had let myself get captured. My boss had given me the wrong intel and now I was paying for it. He dragged me up and led me into the house without saying a word. This must be one of Chris's guards that I was told never followed him home. The door opened and I was tossed inside like a rag doll. Chris was standing there, watching me with an amused smile on his face. He ordered the guard to tie my hands and I couldn't resist because Chris had a gun pointed at me.
You have some nerve coming here.
He ran his hand through my long hair, smiling softly to himself.
Leave us.
He ordered his guards, who promptly obeyed. I was terrified but refused to show it. I flexed my fingers behind me, testing to see if I could free myself. If it was just the two of us left, perhaps I could escape somehow. I was sure of it. Someone had sent me here knowing I would get captured. I had been betrayed. Chris pulled down the zipper of my black hoodie, revealing the tank top I wore underneath. My breaths came out faster as I wondered what he wanted to do with me. I subtly tried to free my hands just in case I got an opening to run away.
Who sent you?
He said. I clenched my teeth and stared at him adamantly. Even though I had gotten betrayed, it was against our ethics to reveal any information. Chris laughed when I didn't respond, shaking his head. He trailed a finger down the side of my face, over my neck and down the middle of my chest. Why was he touching me like that? He muttered to himself that he needed to punish me. I braced myself for whatever torture he had planned for me, so I was shocked when he grabbed my face and kissed me. My eyes were open in surprise as Chris kissed me with his eyes closed. He groaned and pressed harder into me. This man was a psychopath. Tears ran down my face as I started to think of what he could do to me. I felt so violated. His hand came up and grabbed my neck, choking me.
Kiss me back.
I refused, my mouth still against his. When the pressure exerted in, my neck became more than I could bear. I opened my mouth and kissed him back, disgust welling inside me. He lessened his grip and continued to kiss me, pulling my hair and rubbing my neck. My hands came free of the ropes that I had been struggling with, and I rejoiced quietly. I had a chance to escape this place. Chris withdrew and stared at me. He asked who sent me and got angry when I didn't respond. He slapped my face hard and kissed me again. That was how he questioned me, and every time I refused, he would slap or punch me before kissing me. When he finally moved away from me, my face was pulsing, and my body hurt in several places. His back was to me, so I acted fast. I removed the other stun gun I had in the waistband of my jeans, and stilled when he turned to face me again. I stood up calmly and brought up my hand. I gave him no chance to react before stunning him. He fell to the ground, his body twitching slightly. I heard the guard's footsteps from somewhere in the house, and I didn't wait for him to catch up with me. I ran out and climbed up the fence, my muscles groaning in protest. It hurt to move, but I managed to do it. I didn't look back as I got down and hopped on my bike and sped off. I resigned from my job the next day, giving my boss no explanation. If someone in the agency wanted me out of the way, I would gladly step aside. I had enough money to live by myself anyways. I never spoke of what happened to anyone, and I pretended it didn't happen. I still see Chris's face in my nightmares, and I can't control it.